Hey, everybody! Welcome to another episode of Crimes, Killers, Cults,
And beer.
and Beer. This true crime from the point of view of two crazy Florida men. I'm Bill,
And I'm Paul.
and we're going to talk about true crime. You know, it took Todd and I like a year and a half to get the opening part really smooth to the point to where I wasn't like kind of fumbling around trying to figure out exactly what to say and how to say it and all that stuff. Took a year and a half to get there, and then he quits the show.
Oh, yeah. Once you get the perfection, something happens. Somebody puts a stick in your spoke and.
Yeah, we'll get it. What I just said about the point of view of two crazy Florida, that seems kind of bland. Look, we'll work on it. It might take a year and a half. You better not leave after I perfect it, though. Did you say your name?
Yes, I did.
All right.
And Paul.
All right. Anyway, we got a long one for you, so we're just gonna dive into it. But
It'll be probably longer for us than it is for the viewers because
definitely because
we may need some breaks here and there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this water goes through me faster than beer.
Yeah, I know. That definitely doesn't have to change colors.
So, I will say that there's a lot of setup in this one before we get to the first murder. That's all, but it's interesting. So I just gotta throw that out there right off the bat. But believe me, this is a crazy one. This may be why there's not very many podcast episodes on Ivan Milat. Because of he doesn't commit his first known murder until he was 42 years old.
Yeah. And it's probably because he's got 4 names. I mean, is this like really? Like usually only royalty usually takes the 4 name thing.
Yeah.
Or George Herbert Walker Bush.
Ivan Robert Marco Milat. Milat. I'm going to call him Milat.
Milat.
There
you go.
That sounds more Australian.
Yeah. Milat.
That sounded French.
Milat. Yeah, depends on what sidewalk you're on.
So, but no, this is a very this is a really intense one too. I mean, and the setup and everything. Yeah, it's still very interesting. So I'm not trying to say, hey, I'm going to bore you for an hour and 10 minutes before we get to the first one. No, the setup is interesting. I'm just letting you know that there's not going to be a murder for a little while.
Yeah, we got to build up to the suspense.
Right. So
that's what makes a good story. That's what makes a good book or a movie.
Yep.
But right now we don't have that hook,
No.
Yet.
So Ivan Robert Marco Milat was known as the backpacker murderer. He was an Australian serial killer who abducted, assaulted, and robbed and murdered 7 people that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go even further and say he killed a lot more than 7 people. Period. There ain't no that we know of. We know he killed a lot more than 7 people, but there's only 7 on the books.
Yeah.
It was 2 men and 5 women in New South Wales between 1989 and 1992. He would approach backpacking tourists along Hume Highway and pretend to be taking them to transport areas in New South Wales, but he would ultimately take them deep into the Belanglo State Forest where he would kill them. He's suspected in many more murders, like 20 plus, but he's only confirmed to have killed 7. And we're going to touch on the suspected murders at the end. His crimes were also what the inspiration for the Wolf Creek horror movie franchise.
Oh yeah,
which I watched probably about 6 months ago. I'd never seen them before. that was when I first, you know, started looking into Ivan Milat. So I'm like, and then I came across the Wolf Creek movie. I'd seen the Wolf Creek movies come up in like Netflix or whatever. I
Yeah.
just never watched them. And I'm like, oh, okay, so watch this and everything. And so I watched them, and yeah, I mean, it's loosely based on Ivan's story, but it's I use the term loosely because it, all
Hollywood is always loosely based.
all the shit that happened in those movies, I could see Ivan doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you know the guy that came up with the Scream movie franchise heard about Danny Rolling and all of a sudden just you know oh, so therefore the first Scream movie is based on the Gainesville Ripper, which nothing like what happened in Gainesville happened um in that Scream movie. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that he I don't even think that it had anything to do with his idea. I think that he just came up with the idea, and around the same time the was when he got caught for the Gainesville murders, and he's just like, "Oh, I'll just tie the two together because that was big news at the time." That's what I thought, and I said that in our Danny Rolling episode.
Yeah. And the MPA, yeah, the MPAA can be very weird and very stringent when it comes to what material. I mean, if you're trying to base something specifically on a particular story, such as this, you can go through so many edits because oh well, we can't have that, we can't have this. Next thing you know, you can't have anything.
Well, Danny Rolling didn't run around in a big old trench, hooded trench coat or whatever with a ghost mask on.
Yeah.
If
Right.
anything, he was a lot scarier.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ivan was born December 27th, 1944, in Guildford, North South Wales, Australia, to Stephen and Margaret Milat. He was the fifth of 14 children.
Whoa.
10 boys, 4 girls. Stephen, Stephen, it, it's Stefan or Stefan, but if it,
Probably Stefan.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
the way I had it written initially, the Stjepan, that's not a typo. That's how it was spelled.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say Stephen.
Steven. Steve.
Steve. He was a Croatian immigrant, and he made his living as a laborer. He would take work whenever he had an opportunity. Because he had 15 reasons to do so.
Mm-hmm.
He had a very good work ethic, which he wound up passing down to Ivan as well as his other sons. And he was physically strong, and people were happy to hire him. He would work hard. He would go to the bar after work, and he would drink with coworkers, then come home to his family. He wasn't a drunk or anything like that. He just had a routine. Although he really had no real friends to speak of, and he was a very extremely strict and harsh, abusive disciplinarian as well.
Mm.
Sources for this episode are Ryan Green's book Outback Outlaw: The Dark Legacy of Australia's Backpacker Killer Ivan Milat, and a little bit of wiki. That's really all I needed.
All we need.
Yeah. So Stephen had served in the British Army during World War One, and he had moved to Australia following the war. And there he met Margaret, and they got busy. Once his sons were old enough, Stephen taught them how to shoot. And with that many kids, free food is the best food. So he would work, and they would go hunt. And they would prefer hunting to going to school. In fact, truancy was always an issue with his kids,
Mm.
with the Milat boys
Yeah.
and the girls. But Stephen's solidarity passed to his kids, and the family pretty much stuck to themselves. And when they did go to school, they'd frequently get in trouble for beating up other students. Stephen would send them back to school the next day bruised.
Whoa.
Beating up a student, that's a paddling. Get a bad
Mm.
get a bad
Yeah.
grade, that's a paddling. Piss off a neighbor, that's a paddling.
And that's when they did paddlings back then. I don't know what it was like in Australia or anything, but shoot.
Oh, Yeah, paddling up plenty.
Yeah. Yeah, corporal punishment was
It if you're if you're not beating the shit out of your kids, you're doing something wrong.
mhm.
Damn it! There was a movie quote I was trying to that I couldn't get the whole thing. Oh well. Um, but the kids learn how to be tough and take their father's abuse without falling down. The best at it though was Ivan,
Uh-huh.
and the boys stuck together, raising hell, committing minor crimes, and covering for each other if one of them got caught.
Tuh.
Stephen landed another job as a wharf laborer, and that took them to a new place which was even more isolated. Had plenty of hunting, but it also had land that could be farmed, so the kids learned how to raise crops. Even more money staying in the home if they're hunting and raising their own crops. Might have actually been fruitful if they didn't have 14 kids.
Yeah. A lot of mouths to feed. You need a
Yeah.
lot of food.
We're not even going to talk about what Margaret must. Never mind. I won't go there.
I'm seeing that scene from Monty Python's The Meaning of Life.
Every spurn is sacred.
Oh, sorry, honey. Can you go pick that up?
The live liver donation. Same movie too, I think.
I think, yeah, yeah.
But so they were working the farm and going to school, so they learned to function on very little sleep. And the one who took it the best, Ivan.
Mm.
Ivan also got very big and strong, and there was a pecking order among the kids, and they would fight to be the one in charge among them. And before too long, Ivan was the top dog, even though he was the fourth oldest boy. Um, Fighting became as normal to them as playing games was to other kids.
Yeah.
But Ivan took it one step further. He would beat the shit out of his siblings to the point to where they couldn't stand up.
Damn.
But still, if one of his brothers got in trouble, he'd claim responsibility for it and take the consequences.
Huh.
But the farm wasn't as prosperous as Stephen had hoped, so once the kids were old enough to legally do so, each one of them dropped out of school to help out more at home. But before Ivan could legally drop out, he was put in a boys' home and was basically a dumping ground for parents to send their kids that they couldn't handle.
Hmm.
It was a precursor to the troubled teen industry. And there he was subject to hard labor and, breaking the kids' spirits. That was the goal of this place, much like the troubled teen industry. But it was easy compared to his home life, so he excelled there.
Oh man.
This is like, I'm on vacation. I'm on vacation. I'm a holiday.
Right? That's a holiday.
It's a holiday. um, I lost my place. Oh, this is a bit like Carl Panzram's origin story, to be honest with you. But before too long, he was top dog um, there, both by fighting and by being smart. And he was constantly punished, and he's just like, "Please, sir, may I have some more?"
Right?
um, but it still sucked. But he had reasons for keeping his eye on the prize, though, and he was very close with his younger sister Margaret, and this is their youngest kid, and she was really special to him. And when he was released after 2 years, he gave her a bunch of gifts that he had either made or stolen.
Hmm.
There were rumors that the Milat children had incestuous relations. Because of their isolation, that's not out of the realm of possibility to believe that, but it was never determined that incest happened. But still, the Milat kids were very close. As the boys got older, they too got labor jobs, but they still weren't bringing in enough money to stay afloat. You know, Maybe Stephen and Margaret should have considered birth control.
Right? Because yeah, I don't know if I don't know if the state at the time, the establishment at the time offered like to do here in the West. You get money for each kid, but
I don't know. Well, obviously wasn't enough.
no,
Well, it still isn't today.
no, yeah, not at all. Like what, 3 or 4 grand a child, but shoot,
And
that's
that's
supposed to last all year.
yeah, and that's the way it should be though, because otherwise people would just be having litters of kids a lot more than they are now, and
Hmm.
just so. But like like with most prisons, boys schools, but yeah, but like with most prisons and boys' schools, the one Ivan was in turned out to be nothing more than oh boy, a criminal trade school.
Yeah. Oh, oh.
Ivan began committing burglaries, and he taught his brothers the trade as well. And before too long, there was a Milat family burglary ring that was working very well. And if one of the boys got caught, Ivan would claim responsibility.
Hmm.
Through the '60s, Ivan was in and out of jail for his brother's crimes. He didn't get caught. But by now they had graduated to stealing cars and selling the parts, and this was good money for them. Chop shop ring was pretty lucrative there in North South Wales,
Yeah, it must
apparently.
be. Jeez. They weren't stealing farm animals.
Ivan would do time in adult prisons, and although he couldn't run the joint like Carl Panzram did early on, he wasn't anybody's bitch either. He could hold his own if he had to.
Mm.
So if 15-year-old Ivan got into a fight with 15-year-old Panzram, Ivan's getting his ass kicked.
Oh,
No, Panzram was a monster, dude. This guy is too, but I think Panzram's probably the scariest one that individually that we've covered.
yeah. Big dude.
But this guy does give him a run for his money. But I'm hyping it up because I have to, because it's going to be a while before we get to the first murder.
Yeah, right? You gotta add some innuendos. Yeah, some nuances and
So,
oh, yeah.
but after a while, Ivan and his brothers graduated once again and got into bank robbery. Higher stakes, higher payout. But this time there would be armed guards, and this was new ground for them. Plus, a bank robbery would draw a lot more notoriety than stealing a car from somebody at gunpoint.
Mm.
Their first robbery didn't go well. The tellers weren't listening. The vault wasn't accessible, and the manager was able to call the police, who arrived on the scene very quickly. Now it seems them Milat boys have gotten themselves into quite a pickle. I just picture them in um, I don't know, a muscle car with the Australian flag on the top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause it's what, early '60s, correct? Still.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Instead of saying "yee-haw" whenever they jump something, it'll be like "fuck off, cunt."
Uh, yeah, and I'm not sure what kind of automobiles they had in Australia that at the time, if they were able to get the cars that we had, and I mean, obviously, everything gotta be imported,
Yeah.
so
Well, they probably had car factories there at the
yeah,
time but I've never heard of a Australian made car.
yeah. Maybe a Fiat.
Is that Australian?
No,
That's
that's
Italian.
it's Italian. That's closer to Australia,
Oh,
sorta, depending on the shipping at the time, be like,
well,
let's get the easiest car into the country as possible. People
then
need to drive."
Japan would be well, Japan. Well, the '60s, Japan had recovered from World War II.
Yeah, yeah. Probably had some Hondas and VWs.
Apparently, they make good knives in Australia too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a knife.
That's that's a nice. Yeah.
I, I haven't seen Crocodile Dundee in years. I need to watch that movie again. Only the first one because the 2 and 3 sucked.
Yeah. Yeah. The first one
Shoot.
was the best.
Yeah. So the Milat boys were exiting the bank and police were there waiting for them, and they scattered all in different directions, which split the police numbers as well, having to go after all different directions, each one going after a different Milat, like flipping on the light and the cockroaches scatter. All they could do is yell at them because they were innocent people in between the cops and Malats. The Malats weren't using the people as human shields. They were just running in between them, like trying to get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
And the police were like, "Get back here, you cunt!" Hey, saying the C word in Australia is as common as saying shit here.
Yeah.
Like shit almost isn't even a cuss word anymore.
No. Yeah. I mean, you could say it on regular radio.
Yeah.
So even bitch. I mean, you can technically bitch is not even considered a
Yeah.
a censorable
Or you can say you
word
can
for the
say
radio.
you can even call somebody a dick. You just can't call them a dickhead.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One time, years ago, I was working at a restaurant, and this guy calls me a dickhead, and I said, "No, if I was a dickhead, I'd be in your mouth." He's like, there's no coming back from that one.
No. No.
He's like,
Yeah. I did meet one podcaster this past weekend that does have a show called "Don't Be a Dick."
Remind me to tell you about true crime bullshit.
There you go. All right.
There's a funny story, but we don't have time for it in this episode. Okay. But all but one got away, and it was one of Ivan's younger brothers. And in true Malat fashion, Ivan took responsibility for the whole thing. But no, I got that wrong. In true Malat fashion, the one that got caught took responsibility for the whole thing because they caught him red-handed.
Yeah.
But this kid had never been caught or charged with anything before, but he was still sent off to prison. Ivan had snuck away, went down an alley, and hailed a taxi cab. The cab driver picked him up and drove to an address that was not his home in case they were being followed. And when it came time to pay up, Ivan pulled out his sawed-off shotgun and shot the driver in the back through the seat and got out. Just boom! Yes, that's not your first murder. I'm sorry, you don't do that for your first murder.
Yeah.
Just nonchalantly, boom, I'm not going to pay the cab driver. And he was still a teenager at this point.
Wow.
So, yeah, this guy had been at it for a very long time. He's got a very high body count.
Jeez. But that was his first shot.
That we know of.
Yeah, we know.
I mean, when you talk about the Australian outback, the forest areas and stuff, you're talking about, areas that it's impossible to really navigate through, kind of like the Everglades, kind of like deep in the Everglades and everything. If you go into the Everglades, you might not come out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You
If you
better
don't know
know
what you're
your way.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now there's pythons down there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Pythons, alligators. Yeah, you got to mark your trail in order to find your way out.
Yeah. Although a Burmese python isn't going to be able to, it isn't going to go after a full-grown human.
No. No. Unless he's really, really fucking hungry.
Yeah, it's the gators and it's the gators and the boars you got to watch out for down there.
Yeah.
But so Ivan got out of the car thinking that the driver was dead, and he wasn't. He
Mm.
survived, although he was paralyzed, and he couldn't remember a single thing about what had happened to him. You know, Ivan had gotten away with it, but police grabbed a man named Alan Dillon, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the shooting.
What?
Alan Dillon should have gone on a little Hugh Glass type vengeance mission after he got out of prison, looking for Ivan.
Yeah. Yeah. Freaking go Charlie Bronson on him.
Or Michael Douglas in Falling Down.
Yeah.
Great movie. I need to watch. I haven't seen that movie
Yeah.
in years.
That's a good movie.
I need to watch that because I can relate to him now. When I saw it as a teenager, I'm like, oh, what an asshole. Now I totally relate to the
Right?
guy. It's like, I get you. You're my hero.
Yep.
But the next robbery went off just fine, and Ivan had planned it well this time, and they were gone before the police arrived. But the police did suspect that the Milat boys had done it, even though there was no evidence. Now I mentioned Ivan's sister, Margaret. One day later, in 1971, Ivan was walking down the road, along the dirt road leading to their house, and his younger brother, Wally, and Margaret were in a car, and Wally was driving. They were waving to Ivan, and Wally wasn't paying attention, and he hit an oncoming car head on.
Hmm.
Wally was wearing his seatbelt, but Margaret was not, and she was mangled severely and died in Ivan's arms. And he lost it, and he broke down, and he started crying, and that was the first time he cried since he was a child. And Margaret was literally the only person that he had ever actually loved. And he hated his father, and his mother was a pain, and his brothers were just associates. And this may have been part of what fueled the incest rumors, but either way, Ivan had lost the only thing that ever mattered to him, and Wally walked away from the crash with minor cuts and bruises.
Always wear your seatbelts, kids.
Yeah. PSA from CKCB. So Ivan spiraled downward. He stopped planning robberies and just kind of existed. He was going stir crazy. He had to do something to snap himself back into the game. A month after Margaret died, he did. He had been driving down the road aimlessly one night, and he noticed some hitchhikers. And he didn't like hitchhikers. Much like any local has a certain degree of disdain for tourists.
Yeah.
We know, like, all too well in Florida. Just mail us your money and stay home.
Stay out of traffic.
Yeah. He began checking out the female hitchhikers, and and thinking how unsafe it was for them to be out at night. I mean, a psycho killer could get them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there it is.
He stopped and he offered them a ride to wherever they wanted to go, and they were likely thinking that they were safe because there were two of him, or there were two of them and one of him.
Ooh, wrong.
Wrong. They told him where he wanted to go. They told him where they wanted to go, and he told them that he knew shortcuts down the back roads.
Hmm.
There's no shortcuts down the back roads.
No, and there's no back roads. Everything is a back road. It's all a back road.
Yeah. Well. A1A is not a back road.
No.
That's Beachfront Avenue.
Yep.
Ivan drove deep into the Outback and he stopped. He tied the girls up after pulling a knife on them, and then he used the knife to cut off their clothes. They were screaming, and Ivan said that if they didn't shut up, he would kill them. He asked how you gonna scream if I slit your throat?
Mm.
He began raping one of them, and both girls screamed while Ivan just laughed. And screaming wouldn't do him any good at all.
Yeah. In the Outback, no one can hear you scream.
I heard that somewhere. Ivan
Mm.
finished with the first girl, but he was satisfied and he didn't rape the other one. He then drove all night trying to trying to think about what to do with them. And he stopped at the gas station to get the three of them sodas. Hey, you want a soda?
Yeah. You wanna I know in Canada they call it pop. I know what they call it in Australia. A pop, a soda,
Foster's.
a, a sparkly beverage.
Um, they don't consider Foster's beer, so maybe they would consider
Yeah,
Foster's soda.
probably.
Foster's, Australian for soda.
Yeah. More of an electrolyte when you're out in the outback for a while.
While he was inside the store, the girls made their escape and they hid in some bushes. And Ivan came out and he saw his empty truck and he looked around. He stood in silence, not moving or saying anything. I mean, I'm guessing he was just kind of listening or something.
Yeah.
Finally he hopped in his truck and he drove off. And when he was gone, the girls ran into the gas station begging the clerk to call the police. The police arrived and gave the girls a ride to the police station to file a police report. But this was no ordinary cop. It was Ivan's older brother Gunter, who was a police officer.
Ooh.
And as soon
Mm.
as they drove away, Gunter got on his CB and said, "Got him," to which Ivan replied, "Good, False Creek Road." Gunter turned abruptly down a side street and pulled off to the side. And there waiting was Ivan standing next to his truck with a shit-eating grin, taking a big swig out of a soda. Uh, or maybe not. Maybe I've seen one too many horror movies and I made up all that nonsense. Still, if I hadn't said that, you would have totally believed it.
I would.
Anybody would have if they
Yeah.
didn't know the story, because that totally sounds like, especially
'Cause
if somebody's seen Wolf Creek, that would definitely be something, or even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, House of a Thousand Corpses, any of those movies.
yeah. And when you think about it too, it's like you have a family that big with that many kids. There's always gonna be one in the family that wants nothing to do with the family,
Oh, we'll
that
get to
goes
him.
to the good side and decides to join the department, you know?
We'll get to him later on at the end. But you're right. There is one in this family.
There you go.
So, but Ivan's brother wasn't a cop, and as far as I know, he didn't even have a brother named Gunter. But the he might have. Who knows? But the police officer did take them to the police station so that they could file a police report. But what happened next is not made up by me, although you might not believe it after that nonsense that I just made up.
Mm,
The police grilled the girls and actually established that it was Ivan Milat that they were describing. But Ivan wasn't known for sexual crimes, so they thought that the girls were either trying to set Ivan up for something or they were involved in some type of scheme with Ivan.
mm.
Now that does seem like it could be a scene out of the same horror movie that I just made up.
Yeah.
Instead of like having Ivan waiting for him and get him into the police station, he's just like, "Oh, well," and then all of a sudden, and then after he grills him, and the girls are going, "What the hell's going on?" Then Ivan walks out of a back office or something.
Yeah.
"Hey, mate. Good day, mate."
Good day, mate. Welcome back.
Truth be told, I had written out that last part about um them filing the report and like thinking that they were in on it. That's what gave me the idea for the previous paragraph about Gunter.
Uh,
I was like, you know what? I can't help myself. But the police did open an investigation. And word of the police's investigation got back to Ivan, who got the hell out of Dodge.
mm,
He jumped on a flight to New Zealand and was gone long before the police had come to question him. And there in New Zealand, Ivan was alone for the first time in his life. And he got by doing odd jobs wherever he could, but he did all right. He was there for 3 years and he worked under the table, and he purposely stayed off the record. It's like he would only take jobs that paid under the table. He also didn't want to get into any trouble there either, although I wouldn't be surprised if he killed somebody there.
yeah.
But yeah, after 3 years, he had had enough. He wanted to go home. So he booked a flight and his paranoia was justified because while at the airport, authorities identified him. He was actually a wanted man in Australia, and they contacted the Australian law enforcement and let them know that he was headed in their direction. And he was arrested as soon as he stepped off the plane, and he was taken to jail to await trial.
Wow.
Welcome back, mate. You're under arrest.
Yeah.
You,
Welcome back. Holy
you
crap.
cunt.
It's like, seems like security is really, they could really identify people back then, but now, I don't know. Seems like things have changed.
Uh, It was New Zealand that I identified him, not Australia.
Yeah.
He was put on trial for the bank robbery, and there was no evidence against him, so he was found not guilty. And that's kind of weird to me. I mean, they put him on trial, and the prosecutor had nothing ready after 3 years, but they put him on trial anyway.
Huh.
Like, you don't even have anything to. He robbed a bank. No,
Yeah.
it didn't. Oh, anybody see it? No. All right, not guilty. I was
You
like,
think
come
they'd have
on, man.
something prepped?
Yeah. I mean,
Mm.
that's the way it comes off, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But
Mm.
3 years they had to get, to put, and not even 3 years. I mean, he booked his flight. Depending on what time his flight left. What if his flight left the next day? They might have had 24 hours to throw something together.
Yeah. They could have.
That's
Unless they only had one guy wearing all the hats in the freaking department. One
well.
prosecutor.
Plus, New Zealand is not far from Australia at all,
Yeah.
and I think that hold on. I think New Zealand is on the same is like New Zealand is very close to like the I think New Zealand's on the east side of Australia,
Yeah.
which
Northeast.
is which is also where North South Wales is. So
Yeah.
so a flight would probably the flight's probably like an hour if that.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
be like from not even from it's probably be like from flying from like Jacksonville to Miami or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Crossing the Mediterranean or something.
Yeah. Or maybe like Orlando to New Orleans.
Yeah.
But not very far.
Yeah.
Next day he was put on trial for the rape. And 3 years had gone by, and the women's stories had changed from what they had originally stated. And the defense played it off as the women were looking for trouble for hitchhiking at night. And and once again, Ivan testified that the sex was consensual, and he was sorry that they had changed their minds about it later, and he was found not guilty.
Yeah. Uh,
This is a horror movie.
yeah, it is.
Already, this is a horror
Alright.
movie.
Yeah.
He went back home helping with the crops, but before too long, he found a job as a long haul truck driver. Thinking, yeah,
Sounds familiar.
yeah. There's a lot of. I'm sure that there's a lot of victims that he did on that too. I mean,
Yeah.
but during that time in the mid '70s, the family had suffered several more tragedies. His brother David had wrecked a motorcycle and he wasn't wearing a helmet.
Ooh.
This gave him serious brain damage and he could no longer work. He was constantly in pain and he was very vocal about it. And Ivan even came off the road to help, but he couldn't handle his brother's nonstop screaming.
Wow.
You know, not only that, their father Stephen had come down with advanced bowel cancer. Ugh, that's
Yee.
a rotten way to go.
Yeah. Colorectal cancer? No.
Mhm. When I was doing the notes, I googled it just to kind of see what I was going to. I'll just leave this out.
Yeah.
And
When it comes to stuff like that, when you have it and you're at a particular stage, just give me a cyanide pill.
right,
Just
exactly.
give me one and end it there. The hell with the
Yeah.
pain.
So yeah, he had quickly become a shell of the tyrant that he had been, and he was just withering away. And he too was very vocal about it. because he too was constantly in pain and he would take it out on everybody around him. And the grown kids began going their own ways, and leaving Ivan being the only one supporting the family now, which drove a wedge between him and his siblings.
Mm.
So apparently at this point, it wasn't all for one and one for all.
Yeah.
Stephen died April 27th, 1983. The only people who attended the funeral were his wife Margaret, Ivan, and his brother David, as in the one who was permanently disabled. So the only one who was there willingly was Ivan. The only one of the siblings who was there willingly was Ivan.
Wow.
Um, an insurance payout paid for the house, and so now his mother was set, and he decided to finally start over on his own at 38 years old.
Mm.
He wanted to get back into hard labor because that's what he liked doing. So he quit his job as a truck driver and began freelancing on construction sites. He, like Panzram, put all the other workers to shame. And finally, he found something permanent: the North South Wales Road and Traffic Authority. He'd be doing maintenance and repairs and upkeep on all the roads that went through the Outback, and nobody knew those roads better than Ivan. And this was kind of like BTK becoming a census worker.
Yeah. 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 He knew all the nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
Be like, wait up, there's gonna be a pothole right up there. 54 more feet. Take a left.
Yeah. And ignore that mannequin.
Yeah.
If you're a new listener, you should check out our 3-part series on Carl Panzram, episodes 76 to 78. The similarities of their early lives is really crazy, although at age 38, Carl would have been dead a year later.
Mm.
And our BTK series, people are digging that. I'm glad I decided to redo it.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to refresh stuff every now and then. Be like, here's a new one. Here's a new one.
It's just so much better than the originals too. Anyway,
Yeah.
Ivan was still at odds with his siblings, so he began spending time with his cousins. And one of them had something Ivan wanted: a girlfriend named Karen. She denied him, and she was in love with I almost said Carl. She was involved with Ivan's cousin, and they were talking marriage.
Oh.
And she was also pregnant,
Oh.
and she was 16.
Mm.
Any one of these would be considered taboo for Ivan to pursue because he's 38. Not to mention all of them. But Ivan was smitten and he was obsessed, and he had to play the long game to get this notch on his belt. But with all the fake attention and kindness he was showing her was causing Karen to fall in love with him.
Mm.
Finally, while pregnant, the two had sex, and Ivan, being the hit it and quit it type, he actually felt something, and he kept coming back. And he had fallen for 16 and pregnant Karen. Call MTV! He began making plans for their future, and he even had a mobile home set up for the two of them and the baby before Karen had even kicked Ivan's cousin to the curb. I actually used to know somebody in a similar situation. This was the niece of an ex of mine.
Mm-hmm.
She was around 25 years old. She was a bartender, and there was a regular around her age who was like head over heels in love with her. And one day, this guy brings in his 40-year-old uncle into the bar with him, and this just happened to be the time that he worked up the balls to ask her out, and he did, and she's like, "Thanks, but no thanks. But who's that guy you're with?" Within a year, she and the guy's uncle were married with a baby on the way.
Wow.
That's a true story. Yeah, I make up a lot of shit on this podcast, but when I
Yeah.
do, I come clean about it right after I say it.
Right.
No, but that actually happened. It was crazy. And to quote a source, as should have been expected, this was about. Or, hold on, let me start that over again. But to quote the author of the source, as should have been expected, this was when about the time when the shit hit the fan with the family. um, when the cousin heard the news, he dropped to his knees, threw his hands up in the air, and screamed, "For fake Nugan!"
Uh,
I think that's the first Farfig Nugan I've done since you've been on the show.
yeah.
That
Yeah,
came from
that's the first
that,
one.
yeah, that originated with the Joseph Paul Franklin episode,
Mm,
and it's just kind of become a recurring thing every now and then.
yeah.
Except this was the first time it was ever done in an Australian accent.
We ought to have like a little sound bite on that one.
Nah, I like doing it.
No, yeah, with a beat.
With the on
A jingle.
The Larry Hall episode, I went Farfig Nugan. But
Uh,
no, that wasn't Larry Hall episode. That was Real Life Horror Movie episode 62. Yeah,
mm,
that's right. But the cousin and his parents were furious, as well as Ivan's mother's side of the family. And then this kid had knocked a girl up, and his prospects of doing any better were slim to none. But before too long, they realized that Ivan had actually done them a favor because this kid was a loser, and they had accepted the fact that the family would have wound up supporting the cousin, Karen, and the baby.
oh,
Strange how things just have a way of working out.
yeah.
So Ivan and Karen were married in 1985, and before Jason was even born, Ivan's relatives were back on good terms with him. I bet that cousin grew up to be a serial killer after that.
Right? Ah.
Oh man. I mean, the teenager kid's not gonna. Ivan's a big dude, and he's also a badass. He's also a known badass.
Mm,
He wasn't gonna do anything. He wasn't gonna do anything to Ivan.
yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna seem like Ivan's turning over a new leaf, but put a knife in that.
Yeah.
Ivan legally adopted Jason and raised him like he was his own, even getting up um, at night for late feedings and letting Karen sleep. And even if he was up all night, he was able to get to work and be productive the next day. But there were times when his job kept him away for days or even weeks at a time, especially when he put in extra hours in jobs. And what he was trying to do is trying to save money for a nice house and for like a good down payment on a nice house. Um, During those days, the Milat siblings would check in on her, make sure that she had everything that she needed. They're a tight bunch. I'm sure they were also, spying on her,
Yeah.
making sure making sure she didn't have that little cousin coming back over there again. And yeah, but uh, a little over a year later, he took Karen to look at new houses, and they bought a 2-bedroom house, and nothing changed. He was still gone a lot though. But then Ivan began collecting guns,
Mm,
um, which freaked Karen out. She didn't like them, and Jason was Jason was now picking up picking up sticks and pretending that they were guns. Karen hated everything about it, so he compromised and he bought an outdoor shed to lock them up and store them. Although she said that he couldn't buy any more than he already had. So, how many guns is too many?
phew. Well, considering if you're not living in the Outback, but pretty dang close to it, I'd have as many as possible.
Well, the answer, how many guns is too many? Two more than you have at the moment.
Right? Uh,
So, but this small victory ignited the sass in Karen. And the next time they had a disagreement, she stood up for herself. Apparently, one win was all Ivan was going to allow, and he hit her. And immediately he seemed to feel bad about it, and he helped her up and he apologized. And then he left the next day for a long stint at work. And he came home and she showered him with affection. Things would be fine for a day, but then they'd argue. He'd blow up. He didn't punch her, but he'd slap her.
Hmm.
And then he'd leave a few days later, rinse and repeat. And that was their routine.
Wow. Hmm.
But the slaps got a little harder, little by little. And after a while, he was fully abusing her. And they were now miserable. For Ivan, the conquest was long over, and for Karen, the fairy tale had ended, but they were stuck together. I mean, it's taboo enough for you know a 38-year-old to, well, he's older than that by now. He's in his 40s by now.
Yeah.
But but still, it's taboo enough for a 38-year-old to marry a pregnant 16-year-old, and it's even more taboo if said 16-year-old divorces the guy. So they're stuck together.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. I'm not happy to be stuck with you. I saw Huey Lewis in concert. It was
Yeah.
awesome. But Ivan began buying guns again, and when they fought about it, Ivan would just go on a long drive. And the romance was gone, so Ivan began looking elsewhere. And he didn't look for prostitutes. He didn't look for, you know, chicks at bars or anything like that. He decided that his brother Wally's wife Maureen would be fine, and the two of them began having an affair.
Oof.
Um, there were rumors that he was banging all of his brother's wives, and he was after all the alpha. And Karen asked him about the rumors, and he responded with sign language. I think a closed fist to the face means no, my dearest Kevin. I would never betray you or the sanctity of our marriage in Australian sign language.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Right now, I've got like I was like, let me put in Milet's information online here. So I'm actually also looking at pictures too on Google as we're going through this. That way I can get some imagery.
Yeah, he's a creepy looking son of a bitch.
Yeah. Yeah. One of his gun, some of his the picture of his gun. It's like, holy crap! What is that? A freaking bazooka?
Yeah,
That's not no normal gun.
and
Hey.
the guy that they got to play the killer in the Wolf Creek movies, he doesn't look like him,
No.
like the actors that they cast in the Mindhunter series to play the serial killers, but it's the same type of person. I think he was well cast.
Yeah. Hmm.
Finally, on Valentine's Day,
That day.
that day, VD 1987, VD.
Double meaning.
By the time this episode comes out, Valentine's Day will have already passed. So, hope you guys enjoyed the collaboration. That was
Yeah,
fun to
right?
do. But it was definitely fun to do. Get to hear us do the Dippolito story and at warp speed.
Yeah.
It came out well,
Yeah.
but we
That was
recorded
good.
20 minutes and it could only be like 15, so I had to
Yeah.
do a lot of cutting out of spaces. So it was just like, yeah, and then they did this, 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 and then they did this.
Uh,
I wish we were. I wish we were that fluent, you know, that clear as speakers or whatever. It's like you're listening to an episode on 1.5 speed.
yeah.
But so on Valentine's Day 1987, Ivan came home to an empty house. Karen's mother had showed up with the truck and they bolted while he was out for work. But he tried to come home on Valentine's Day. I mean, hey,
Hmm.
so he could sign language her again.
Eh,
The divorce papers came, and Ivan tried to get out of child support. It didn't work. She got she got alimony and full custody as well. Not to mention, Jason was a mama's boy and chose his mother over Ivan, and he had no idea where they had gone.
uh,
The divorce was finalized in 1989, and Karen had turned Jason against him. So now Karen was public enemy numero uno.
ooh,
Now, I'm just going to say it again. There's a lot to unpack here. This is a slow burn of things that lead up to Ivan becoming a murderer. He's 42 or 43 years old at this point. Most serial killers start in their 20s, which makes Ivan rare. I think the only late bloomer, that that we've done until now was David Carpenter, the Trailside Killer, and
mm,
he also started in his 40s.
hmm,
That we know of.
that we know. Yeah.
That's an interesting episode too. Check it out. I don't know what number it is, but that was a good one. Ivan then quit working to get out of paying Karen, and he did under the table work. He found that easily. He made decent money, but now he was kind of harnessed. Um, but he was kind of harnessed before with Karen and Jason, and now he was a wild man on the prowl. After the divorce, Ivan had rekindled his relationship with his siblings somewhat. His brother Richard was his closest brother because his wife was the only one Ivan hadn't slept with, which makes me wonder what his wife looked like.
Yeah.
Um, he also became somewhat close with his sister Shirley, and he had been down and out. And once he reached out to him, they reciprocated. And Shirley would go on long rides in the wilderness at night with him, and Richard would hang out and talk. And this kind of rejuvenated Ivan. One night he picked up a hitchhiker named Paul Onions from the UK. He was hiking around trying to find work, and Ivan tried to rob him, but Paul jumped out of the moving car and took off. Ivan fired shots at him but missed, and Paul lost all of his things, but he survived unharmed. After that, Ivan began picking up even more hitchhikers and robbing them and just dropping them off just outside of civilization. Um, and I'm sure he was killing some of them too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's just bonus money. Not beer money, though, because Ivan didn't drink.
Mm,
Um, One thing Ivan had all throughout his life was power, and he gained a lot more of that when he married Karen. But she had stripped him of it when he left, and he desperately wanted it back. So those of you waiting for Moida, you can see where this is heading. Ivan started spiraling out of control, and he would rob hitchhikers. He would just drive aimlessly all night. Gas was cheap in 1989.
Oh, yeah.
But he would miss work because he was hundreds of miles away. Like um, every December there was, and I'm not kidding about the name, Confest. It is a bush camp festival celebrating all the subcultures that made up Australia. I just find it funny that they called it Confest, considering how European types wound up. The first European settlers to go there were
Yeah.
convicts.
Yeah. It was a prison colony.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I bet Confest would be pretty fun to go to, though.
Yeah, probably. It, phew, that's got to be a blast.
Yeah. I'm thinking like kind of like Burning Man type of thing,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
hitchhikers would flock there. But in 1989, hitchhikers were taking a lot more precautions because there have been lots of report of hitchhikers being robbed as well as hitchhikers that had gone missing. And they would travel in pairs as well as not hitchhiking at night. Whatever gave them the illusion of safety. And now, just because
Boom, boom, boom.
Deborah Everest and James Gibson were a pair of 19-year-olds in love. true love. They were on vacation from Frankston. They were hitchhiking their way to Confest to party hard. And they were sure they'd meet up with a group of people once they got there and figured they were safe because there was two of them. And I guess the court really did a number on the two girls that Ivan had picked up a year prior. So they were hoping a friend would pick them up and get them to Confest. Instead, they found Ivan, or more specifically, Ivan found them.
Yeah.
Although he said that he was heading to Confest and he knew details about it, so they trusted him, and he was a local. Of course, he knew details about it, you know. So he chatted away with them, and everything was groovy, and they didn't even notice that he was slowly taking them in the wrong direction. He was heading into the Belanglo State Forest where he had taken the girls from 2 years ago, and probably quite a few other people as well.
Mhm.
Before too long, they started realizing they were going the wrong way, despite Ivan's claims that it was a shortcut. Remember,
Uh,
we need to start coming up with a CKCB rule book because uh, Matthew from Murder Coaster and I we made a rule that on the Peter Curtin episode we made a rule that there's never a shortcut.
there's never a shortcut.
There's
Every
never
road leads to the way of your destination.
right, but we can't use it. It's never a mannequin because Morbid coined that one. We can use it, but we can't put it in our rule book.
Yeah.
but but there's never a shortcut.
Never.
James started demanding that Ivan stop the car, and I don't think that he realized that if he had let them out right there, they'd be dead anyway, miles from civilization, with all that wants to kill you that Australia has to offer.
Mhm.
Finally, Ivan stomped the brakes, causing James, who was in the front seat, to fly forward and hit the dashboard. He
Mm.
wasn't wearing his seatbelt, and at the same time, Ivan grabbed a large knife between his seat and the door. And what he did in a split second was straight out of a horror movie. When James flung forward, Ivan reached the knife over where his torso had been, so that on the recoil, James would knife himself in the back.
Oh.
That happened, piercing James's spinal cord. James was immediately paralyzed from the waist down. And Deborah started, God, can you imagine that?
Man. Ouch.
But you don't just do that first time.
No.
No, that's been practiced to get it like that to where it would paralyze.
Yeah.
That's been practiced. That's been perfected. Deborah started screaming, and Ivan pulled out a rifle, and she took the hint and was quiet. And he was driving deeper into the forest, and looking around, she started to realize the gravity of her situation. If she wanted to live, if she needed Bill, and that was the name that Ivan had given them. Like
Oh.
if they were going to make it out of there alive, Ivan would have to get them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, and he just impaled her boyfriend with a Crocodile Dundee sized knife.
Damn.
Well, it didn't impale him, but you know what I mean.
Pretty close to it. I mean, if you
Yeah.
severed your spinal cord, you're
It was a big knife. Crocodile Dundee would be
sure.
he would be impressed with that knife. Now that's a knife.
That's a knife. They have pictures of that knife? I did have the
I'm sure there is a picture of it because that knife was tied to him later forensically. So I'm sure there is a picture of it somewhere. If there, I'll look for pictures. I'll put them up on the socials. Ivan finally stopped and jumped out of the truck, and he grabbed Deborah by the hair and he dragged her out and he threw her on the ground and tied her up. He never even said a word to her. And once she was tied, he dragged her deep into the woods and he just dropped her. They took off, but he came back with James draped over his shoulder and propped him up by a tree in full view of Deborah and what he was about to do to her.
Whoa.
Ivan then dragged Deborah just feet in front of her helpless boyfriend, cut her clothes off, and then he began raping her slowly and sadistically. And she screamed the entire time, but there was nobody around for 100 miles.
Mm.
During the majority of the assault, Ivan kept making eye contact with James and grinning. You know,
Wow.
and he wasn't even looking that much at Deborah at all. And Ivan had noticed that James had been blinded by his tears, like his eyes were just basically shut,
Yeah.
you know. So because he's tied up, he can't wipe his tears. So Ivan got up, he cleared James's eyes with water so that he could see clearly, and then went back to what he was doing to Deborah.
Damn.
After hours of being brutalized, Deborah went into shock, and her actions weren't getting a reaction. Um, his actions weren't getting a reaction from her anymore. So he'd been slapping her in the face, pinching her, and jerking on her hair, and that worked for a little bit. But she eventually became numb from that as well. So he just started pummeling her hard, and that worked as well for a bit. Once she became numb from that, he dragged her over to the tree and propped her up next to James. And then he went to the cooler of his truck and got a beer and sat down near them. He just sat there drinking beer after beer. He then lined up the cans near them, and then he used the cans for target practice, adding psychological torture to the hell that he had already inflicted on them.
Yeah. Damn.
And if you're thinking I contradicted myself on what I said a minute ago, don't. Just put a knife in that. Oh, that was probably a bad time to use that. But Deborah and James weren't responding to his talent show, so he grabbed his knife and he laid James down on his back and he slowly pushed the knife into James' stomach while grinning at Deborah. Although she was catatonic at this point, he didn't stab. He wanted to make sure that James felt everything, and he did. He wouldn't move, but his nerves still he couldn't move, but his nerves still worked.
Mm.
But finally, Ivan started twisting the knife, um, and James began screaming so loud it snapped Deborah out of her catatonic state. And she saw the state that James was in, and she started screaming too. And then he started just repeatedly stabbing James until he finally died. But Ivan
Jeez.
still wasn't done. This put him in the mood, so he grabbed Deborah again and began raping her again. And she managed to bite him, and which Ivan responded by beating her as he was raping her. He pounded her skull in, and then he continued until she was dead. He then grabbed his rope and cooler, and he left the beer cans, and he stacked the bodies up and covered them with brush, and he hopped in his truck and he went home, tossing their personal items out the window as he drove. He lived 100 miles from where the bodies were.
Damn. Now, to those who are wondering when the murder was going to start, are you happy now?
Yeah, right. Was was this everything you hoped for? Oh my god, that was horrible.
Right. Ah. uh,
Remember what I said that he was suspected in many more murders that he was convicted of, and there have been lots of hitchhikers missing. Of course, you remember that because I've only said it about 20 times in this episode. But still, no way this was his first murder. No way.
couldn't been. I mean, yeah, this is brutal. Just yeah, he he had to
He's a
work up
yeah,
the way of
he's
doing it, or I don't know.
yeah.
Eh.
Now this was Ivan's confession. What I just said.
Mhm.
But this brings up lots of debate, not so much as the brutality, but just some things. Like for one, how is a 43-year-old able to do two 19-year-olds? Ivan wasn't a drinker, but remember, James was in the front seat next to Ivan. If it was just Ivan, Deborah would have been able in the perfect position from the back seat to strangle Ivan or at least screw him up to the point to where he, they could have forced him to pull over before he was ready to begin the assault.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have been able to take control of the situation unless, take a guess.
Mm, could have been somebody else there.
Yep. someone in the back seat with Deborah, somebody to help carry the bound bodies, somebody to drink all the beer because Ivan didn't drink. That's why I would say it's just like I see, like
Yeah.
he was drinking all the beer. He was drinking all the beer. People, you and probably everybody that's listening is like, you just said he didn't drink.
Yeah, right? If he didn't drink, why in the hell was he drinking the beer? Ah,
So Ivan, and also not to mention somebody, Ivan to drive home his accomplice after, because his accomplice was drunk. For Ivan to do all of this himself and to start the assault with, while driving, he would have to have the he would have needed the speed of the Flash or something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Not to mention he would have had to start drinking.
Yeah, exactly. Unless he had
and
2
rem-
personalities.
yeah, and remember, he and his family were tight to the point to where one would take the fall for the other. Sadistic loyalty.
Mhm.
And all of the early crimes were done as a group, but nobody other than Ivan was charged with these murders. A hiker found James's camera on the road and he took it home and he developed the pictures, although nothing having to do with the murders was on the film. So these disappearances were chalked up to them getting lost on the way to Confest, and but their families never bought that story though.
Yeah.
January 20th, 1991, Ivan struck again. 21-year-old Simone Schmidl, um, or Schmidl, was Simone Schmidl was in Sydney, Australia, and her mother was flying there from Germany to meet her. She accidentally booked her flight to Melbourne, which is 600 miles away from Sydney.
Yee.
She decided that she had to get to Melbourne to meet her mother because she had no way of contacting her. So she began hitchhiking, hoping that somebody would pick her up. Somebody did. It was Ivan.
Mhm.
Ivan pulled up with a friendly grin, and she jumped in the truck and began telling Ivan what had happened. Ivan told her he just happened to be heading to Melbourne, 600 miles away, with no
Yeah.
suitcases, no bags, no overnight bags or anything like that. He's just driving 600 miles. They talked for a while. Ivan telling her about Australia and Simone telling him about Germany. Before too long, Ivan began bitching about how much he hated immigrants coming from other countries and taking their jobs. They took our jobs.
Yeah.
They took our jobs. Simone was uncomfortable, but she had to get to Melbourne, and she tried to let the hate Ivan was spewing, she just let that be a means to an end.
Yeah.
Ivan turned onto a side road that headed deeper into the forest, and Simone didn't even realize that she was in trouble until Ivan stopped the truck.
Oh.
Like James and Deborah, he dragged her into the woods, raped and tortured her for hours, and then stabbed her to death, and then covered her up with branches and took off. I'm not going to go through all that hell that we did with Deborah and James, because his
Mhm.
mo doesn't change. I'm not going to read. I'd just basically be rereading the entire thing over and over and over again, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
If you
Sure.
want to hear it, just go back a few minutes and listen to me read that over again, and then put Simone's name into it.
Yep.
But um, he tortured her for hours, stabbed her to death, then covered her up with branches and took off. By the time her body was found, it was decomposed and it could only be identified through dental records. This would only be tied to Ivan because the knife marks on the bones, it was determined to be the same knife that was used in the other murders. And Ivan had also stabbed her in the spine, paralyzing her.
Oh, seems like that's his trademark.
Yeah. And he didn't drink, so he probably drank water too.
Yeah. Hmm.
The way Simone's parents found out about her murder was really screwed up. Um, and her mother arrived in Melbourne, and when Simone didn't show up, and she filed a missing person report, nothing came of it. And her parents began hoping that she had met a nice young man and settled down, and just hadn't contacted them yet. Later, when the skeleton was found, it was identified by dental records and shipped back to Germany to be buried. The German police knew who she was, but Simone's parents had also filed a missing persons report there in case maybe she never left Germany.
Mm.
The repeated phone calls for status updates were blown off by the police, and finally, after Simone was already in the ground, somebody made the connection, and the police called to tell them about that. And we actually have audio of that call. I'm going to go ahead and play that. It's just the audio from the police officers, and there's no audio from Simone's parents.
Hello, Mrs. Schmiedel? This is the police. Funny thing happened. You're going to love this, yeah? By the way, did you catch that football match last night? What a great game, yeah? Anyway, crazy thing happened. You know how you've been calling us about your daughter, Simone? Yeah, about that. We've known where she was for weeks now. Where is she? That is the funny part. We buried her a month ago. She was brutally murdered in Australia. Yeah, 2 years ago. That's the funny part. They identified the body, yeah, and shipped it to us. We didn't even realize she was your daughter. We thought she was Simone Schnitzel. Not Schmiedel. Yeah, common mistake. Could have happened to anyone. Mrs. Spiegel? Hello? Are you there?
Oh, man. Oh, Jesus.
That wasn't an actual phone call. That was Matthew from Murder Coaster. Thanks, Matthew.
Good job, Matt. Awesome.
Yeah, he's my corny German accent guy.
Good job.
He does
Good
it so
job.
well. He does it pretty much all through the 2 Peter Curtin episodes.
Oh, man.
But once again, there's debate on whether or not Ivan had acted alone. Would she have gotten into the truck in the middle of nowhere? Probably, because she was desperate to get to Melbourne. That's my opinion, but who knows? But Ivan had already started boasting about killing people to coworkers who just thought that he was talking shit. But in the months after Simone was found, another female German tourist went missing, and later a pair of pink pants had been found near where Simone's body had been when she was found.
Mm.
After that, almost a year went by before Ivan killed again, that we know of, although many tourists had gone missing, and most of these still have yet to be found even today.
Mm.
December 1991, Gabor Neugebauer and Anja Habschied were staying at the King's Cross Backpackers Inn in Sydney for Christmas. But they headed out on Boxing Day on the 26th to get to Darwin with plans to stop in Adelaide before they got there. And at that time, John Bunting was just 8 months out from going on his first, from his first murder. He lived in that area.
Mm.
And check out our episode 48, that was the Bodies and Barrels episode. Yeah.
Oh.
That's a crazy episode. But this is actually our third Australian story.
Yeah.
Yeah. That guy was a crazy son of a bitch. But that was a really good episode too. Gabor and Anja had been warned about the disappearances of hikers, but they weren't worried. They were young and indestructible. Gabor was the first of the couple to be found dead, and he had been shot. He had actually been propped up by a tree and used for target practice.
Jesus.
Dozens of bullets were found throughout his body. When he or they were done, they untied him and they covered him with brush. To me, this definitely seems like something 2 people would do, because I just don't see just one person going through all that trouble by themselves.
Yeah.
This, in my opinion, is a hold my beer and watch this type addict. You're not just going to be like, hey, I'm going to shoot you, bang, 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 bang. when you're gonna go all crazy like that, you're not gonna do that by yourself. You want somebody there to enjoy it with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Mm.
um, hundreds of bullet casings that matched Ivan's rifle were found there, and Ivan had toyed with Gabor before shooting him by shooting the ground near him, and Gabor had also been strangled. But Anja suffered a much worse fate than the previous victims. I mean, she had been brutally raped for hours, but she was also decapitated with a large knife.
Ooh.
And she had been paralyzed, but Gabor had not. Could he have done all that by himself?
I don't think so.
Nah. April
Huh.
18th, 1992. Joanne Walters and Caroline Clark, two 18-year-olds from the UK, left the King's Cross Backpacker Inn, the same that Anja and Gabor had stayed at. Their plan was to hike out to find some seasonal work to pay for their vacation. The last time they were seen alive, they were asking for directions along Hume Highway, and this is where Ivan had picked up all of his victims.
Mm.
They were picked up, bound, raped, tortured, murdered, and hidden under the brush. Clark had been used for target practice as 10 rounds were found in her body. Walters had been paralyzed, then stabbed non-lethally multiple times and left to bleed out.
Phew. Right.
Walters and Clark were the final official victims attributed to Ivan. But because of how isolated he was and how easily it was for him to do this without any worry of being caught, it's foolish to think that that's all that he did. I mean, he even boasted that there being a lot more. He even
Mhm.
confessed a lot more later, but which we'll get to, so we'll put a knife in that.
Knife.
Not to mention the very high number of missing hitchhikers.
Yeah. Lots of
Lots of them.
hitchhikers.
September of 1992, two explorers were walking around the Belanglo forest when they found a corpse. They called the police, who the next day found another one. These were Joanna Walters and Caroline Clark. In October of 93, two more corpses have been found in the same area that had not been there, or that had been there the whole time, but were not found. And they were Gibson and Everest.
Hmm.
Gibson's camera had been found 75 miles north of where the bodies were.
Jeez. Oh. They find anything on the camera?
No, that was the camera, the film that I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Or there wasn't anything. I mean,
Nothing
you're not
tied
gonna
to
you're not gonna take pictures while you're in in the truck with the guy who's going to kill you.
yeah. Maybe
But
nowadays, you know,
nowadays, yeah,
camera phone.
but yeah, you just hit record and lay it next to you.
Yeah.
But police began sweeping the area there to see if there was more to find, and that's when they found Simone Schmidl or
Schmiedel. Schmiedel.
Schmidl.
Yeah.
They found her on November 1st with the pink jeans that weren't hers. They belonged to Anja, and that led them to finding both Anja and Gabor.
Hmm.
The local government offered $500,000 for any information that could lead to the arrest and prosecution of the killer. Police suspected Ivan, and they didn't think that he worked alone. So thousands of calls came in, making it extremely hard to come up with anything tangible, whether it was whether it was there or not. Somebody could have come in with an eyewitness, but all of these phone calls they were getting saying, "Oh, just bullshit." People injecting themselves into the story, trying to get the money.
Yep.
You know, even if it was a you know minute by minute eyewitness account of it, could have easily been overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they began going through every police report that they had, and they came across Paul Onions, and they called him, and he came back to Australia on his own dime to assist them in the investigation. Paul, as well as many other reports, um, described one person, Ivan Milat. But they needed a physical connection to the murders to arrest him.
Mm-hmm.
So the police put Ivan's house under surveillance, and Ivan knew it. They actually saw saw Ivan watching them through binoculars.
Oh man.
Finally, they got a credible tip that there was lots of illegal firearms stored in the house, and that's what they needed. So they surrounded the house with snipers and trees. And Ivan did not see this. He was busy.
Mm,
They smashed down his door and they grabbed him. They found him in bed naked with his girlfriend. Yeah, he had no chance to arm himself or to retaliate. But
yeah.
there weren't any weapons in the house.
Kept them in the shed.
Nope.
No.
Shed's probably has tools in it at this point because Karen's no longer in the picture.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So he had been tipped off by Wally and some of his other brothers who the police had questioned, and Ivan made sure that those weapons were gone. He had hidden them in the house, like in the walls,
Oh. Yeah.
and they also found two sleeping bags that had belonged to two of the missing hikers. And Ivan just said that they stayed at his house for a few nights and forgot the sleeping bags.
Hmm.
These weren't
Right.
any of the known victims. It was just people that were still missing at that point.
Yeah.
They arrested him for abducting Paul Onions, and search warrants were issued for both Ivan and Wally's house on probable cause for the guns. And Wally's house is where they found the illegal guns.
Ooh.
Plus, Ivan had disassembled the 22 rifle that he had used to to kill those people,
Mm-hmm.
and those parts were also found in Wally's house. You know, along with the illegal weapons. Ivan and Wally were brought up on charges, and murder was added to Ivan because of the 22. They also came up with many pieces of women's clothing that belonged to the victims. A whole laundry list of charges was added, and Ivan fired his attorney for not fighting them.
Hmm.
So they gave him a public defender. Hold off. This public defender actually did his job. Over 200 witnesses testified in trial, but the public defender actually did a good job of casting doubt on whether or not Ivan was guilty. Ivan was convinced that he would be found innocent, and in a phone interview with the press, Ivan said, Ivan said, "And in your best Aussie accent, Paul, go."
I didn't do it. I don't know who did it. It's up to them to prove my guilt. Not me to prove my innocence.
That was very good. Sound like Jason Statham.
Except with a little bit more hair.
A little bit. It wasn't looking good for Ivan, though, so his attorney hammered the idea that Ivan couldn't have done all this alone. He suggested that he suggested I win. I win a glass of water. It's kind of my thing, my trademark.
Oh yeah. Water.
He suggested that if Ivan was guilty, all of his brothers and even his sister were as well, and I'm sure that didn't sit very well with the family.
Yeah.
There's no word on if that attorney turned up missing.
Yeah, right.
The prosecutors proved that Ivan's rifle was the one that killed the victims by gunshot, and they also went through all of his employers, and they placed him in the vicinity of most of the they placed him working in the vicinity of where most of the murders had happened. Even the paralyzing tactic was traced back to an arms dealer that Ivan knew. This man had been arrested, and this man had actually done this. And this tactic was identical to what Ivan had done. This prosecutor did his fucking job.
Wow. Yeah.
In fact, you know what? This prosecutor,
He did that right.
yeah, the defense had been strong at one point, but was reduced to Ivan's siblings fumbling to provide him with an alibi. I mean, that's just like, that's like a football game where like the away team comes up with a really big lead early in the game, and then the home team just powers back and takes the lead and takes the win.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, it looked like Ivan might get off
Yep.
because of how good of a job the public defender had done. I bet he wasn't a public defender much longer after that. I bet he got picked up by a practice.
Yep.
Even though he lost, I mean, you're not going to win them all. But what he did for Ivan early on was, from an attorney's standpoint, pretty fucking impressive. But July 27th, 1996, Ivan was found guilty of all the crimes he was charged with after 18 weeks of trial.
Damn. That's long.
He was sentenced to life with no parole for each murder, as well as 18 years for the robbery and abduction and attempted murder of Paul Onions. He made multiple attempts to get. He made multiple appeals, and get this, due to claims that he had not received legal representation on the basis that the legal counsel would have been able to convince the jury that there was no actual evidence tying him to the crime.
Hmm.
In other words, my attorney didn't get me found innocent, so therefore I was wronged. But still, I mean, but the judge told Ivan to fuck off.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And the case went to the Supreme Court in 2005, and the sentence was upheld. You're done, Ivan.
And in 2005? Wow.
He was taken to Maitland Gaol, a very tough prison, and it didn't take the inmates very long to find out what he had done to those women. And on his very first day there, Ivan was found beaten to a pulp almost to death. After that, Ivan tried to stay out of sight of anyone but the guards. And I don't know if I said this later on in the notes. If I did, I'll just skip it when we get there. But still, it's just like there was no evidence tying him to the crime.
Yeah.
What about the rifle?
Yeah. I mean, didn't they do a ballistics?
Yeah,
No
that's how they determined that.
No, yeah. Or
He
any
had
DNA on the just the clothing or the sleeping bags. You'd had to pull some DNA off of those.
Yeah, it didn't say anything about DNA that I can recall. But still, the rifle's enough to. That's physical evidence. That was your rifle. Your fingerprints are on it. Well, they were probably wiped clean, but still, that was his rifle. That was legally registered to him, and he had left bullet casings all over the place. They put the rifle back together. They tested it. The fire mark on the casing matched. That's not circumstantial evidence,
right?
So Ivan struck up a friendship with a disgraced city councilman named George Savas. He had been running a drug ring out of his office.
Oh.
He was in for life as well, and Ivan, George, and two other inmates came up with a plan to escape prison, and over the next year they planned and collected all the items they thought they'd need for their big prison break. There was a guard stationed outside their block at all times, so step one would be to kill this guard quickly and quietly. Savas had everything else that he needed, that he thought that he needed, and he just needed somebody to kill the guard, because he and the other two, they weren't killers. So enter Ivan, who was more than happy to put his expertise to use. I thought he was innocent.
Yeah, right.
Thought he was innocent. Thought he didn't do it. Thought he wasn't a killer. He didn't do that.
He just lied on his resume.
Yeah. But Savas wasn't into Ivan to be his buddy. To him, Ivan was cannon fodder. He figured that if the guard was killed, Ivan's status as an infamous serial killer would shift all the attention to capturing him, allowing the him and the other two to slip away.
Mm.
But somebody snitched, and the guard was safe, and the warden actually allowed the plan to continue. You know, let them think, like,
Oh,
don't do
yeah, let them
anything.
think that they don't know about it.
Yeah. They allowed the prisoners to escape from their cells, thinking all was in order, and when the cumbersome foursome got to the guard post, they found a squad of heavily armed police officers on loan from the police department. No!
No. Uh, man.
They need to make an actual movie about Ivan,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that scene right there would be worth the price of the movie ticket.
Yep.
Turn around and, you know, Savas and the other two are like, "Oh, no, 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 no," and Ivan's just like, "Well, fuck."
Right? Yeah. That would be an easy screenplay to write.
Yeah. They returned to their but that murder scene, damn.
Oh, man. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
And you know what? If they obviously Hollywood would dumb it down a little bit, and me knowing the story, like, if I watched that movie, I'd be like, "That's not how it happened. It was a lot
Yeah,
worse than
yeah.
that." But I don't know. They get pretty gory in some of these horror movies these days.
Oh, yeah. Some of them, there's quite a few I can't watch. It's blood porn.
Yeah.
Those I definitely can't watch, you know?
Yeah, I'm
Some
not like,
now, the psychological thrillers, yes,
yeah.
and it seems like most of them are
Like
going that route.
the Hostel movies, the
Yeah.
Terrifier movies, those are just gore porn. That's
Yeah.
all they are.
So, Saw, I can't even watch those,
Saw
man.
is okay. Saw doesn't really get to the level that, like, Hostel and Terrifier do.
Oh, yeah.
But still, Saw's in the conversation too, definitely.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so they were the cumbersome foursome, I like that. They were returned to their cells, and they were gonna stand trial for the escape attempt. So Voss hung himself in his cell and was found dead the next morning.
Mm,
Ivan was sent to the maximum security wing of Goulburn Correctional Center until 2001, when the brand new Supermax prison was opened next to Goulburn.
mm.
He was actually the first inmate to enter custody there.
Whoa. Mm.
Ivan hated the Supermax, and he began trying to kill himself, and he was eating razor blades and other metal pieces.
Holy shit. Oh, man.
He was trying to get put into the mental health facility, and after after the metal pieces were surgically removed, the caseworker told Ivan to fuck off. Ivan wasn't going anywhere.
Why did they just I I don't know. I get Oh, is that inhumane by not treating a prisoner
I guess
from
so.
eating metal blades? I don't
But
know. He
little,
just did it to himself.
but shards of metal.
Mm,
There's one case when eating shards of metal did not kill somebody.
yeah.
Our very first episode, Michael Malloy.
Mm,
You need to listen to that one. That story
yeah.
will
That's
blow your
number
mind.
1.
That's our very first episode.
Yeah.
And it's kind of you could definitely tell it's a very early episode, but as far as content and delivery and everything, it kind of holds up,
Mm,
unlike some of the episodes that followed it.
yeah.
But so in in 2009, his final appeal was rejected, and this is intense. He wanted to send the review board a package, and the package contained one of Ivan's fingers. He had completely sawed off one of his fingers the night before using a plastic knife.
Whoa.
Sawed right through right through the knuckle, right through the tendons,
Especially plastic. Holy shit, would that have been a struggle.
and painful too.
Oh,
Long,
hell yeah.
tedious.
Damn. Mm. I don't know, maybe he sat on his hand for a while for it to get
Yeah, I was
numb
just
before he did
thinking
that.
that maybe he numbed his hand or something. But still,
Damn. Jeez.
The package wasn't allowed to leave the facility, and Ivan had cut the finger off for nothing. And doctors said it was impossible to reattach it because it was so sloppily done.
Yeah, I bet. Man. Yeah, some of those
2019,
plastic knives too, they don't have depending
it's not
on
sharp.
the
It's not
edges.
sharp.
Yeah, it's like, what? It's like, you might as well use the spoon.
Yeah. I want to play a game. You have been killing people with no regard for them, putting them through hell. You want to get out of here? There is a timer that is going to dispatch poison
Mm.
coming through there. It will dispatch in exactly 3 hours. Over there in the corner, there is a plastic knife. The only way to do it is to cut your finger off with a plastic knife, insert it into the hole in the wall. It has to go all the way in. Therefore, you have to put your finger in it and then use your finger on your other hand to push it in. Let the games begin.
Oh, yeah.
I just came up with that right off the top of my head. That would be pretty feasible as one of the little trials in a Saw movie.
Yep.
In 2019, Ivan came down with esophageal cancer. Esophageal cancer. It was taken to a prison hospital, and the cancer progressed very quickly. He lost a lot of weight, and on October 27th, 2019, Ivan Milat died at 74 years old.
Good, I was gonna wait. I was like, I ain't even gonna ask. Is he dead yet?
During his final year, criminologists and detectives reportedly visited Ivan, hoping to get confessions for all of the unsolved murders. He never opened his mouth, and there were no deathbed confessions. He did admit to his mother before she had died that he was responsible for the murders that he had been charged with, but he said nothing about help, or his mother didn't mention it when she revealed the information.
Mm.
Also, when Ivan's court barrister, Terry Martin, from the murder trial was on his deathbed, Ivan managed to get a visit with him, and he told him that his sister Shirley was with him at every murder, drinking, laughing, and egging him on as he tortured these people. And
Wow.
but this confession was inadmissible at court. And this was what ignited the debate on whether or not Ivan had acted alone. Like, I mean, it was already speculated, but this is what really kicked it into gear.
Mm-hmm.
The press interviewed Richard Milat, and he said, if they were going to get me for the murders, they would have got me by now. Boris Milat said when he was interviewed, I didn't put that quote or this next one in red. Boris Milat said that he was interviewed. Take it, Paul.
Oh, yeah, all my brothers are capable of extreme violence. Or should I do it in an Australian accent?
Yeah, do it in Australian. You did such a good job with that.
All my brothers are capable of extreme violence. Given the right time and place, the things I can tell you are much worse than what Ivan's meant to have done. Everywhere he's worked, people have disappeared. I know where he's been. If Ivan's done these murders, I reckon he's done a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, and Boris estimated 28 victims. Once again, good job on that accent. Okay, I got my German guy, and you're my Aussie guy. So the Milat family continues to expand in that area. Assault and rape charges pop up from here and there from various men in the family, as well as weapons charges. No murders that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
Do I believe Ivan did all the unsolved murders with help? You're damn right I do.
I do.
Yeah. Ivan's supposed last murder was in 1992. He was caught in 1996, which we'll get to. We're not done yet.
Mm.
And in the 4 years between 92 and 96, the murders became known as the backpacker murders. And many other bodies were found in that area but couldn't be tied to Ivan. So they're unsolved. And we're going to list some of them, and you can tell us what you think. One unsolved case that they think was Ivan happened in 1971 when he was 26 years old. February 26, Karen Rowland disappeared. She was supposed to be meeting her sister at a motel. She never made it. Her car was found abandoned, and she was found later that year at a air disaster memorial site, but it
Huh.
was never considered a murder. Why? I don't know. But 15 years later, the photos from her scene matched some of the scenes that were found in Belanglo Forest.
Mhm.
And what does that even mean? Her car was abandoned. She was found dead a good distance away from where the car was. Oh, and she was pregnant too at the time that she disappeared.
Oh, a double murder.
Yeah. Leanne Goodall was last seen December 30th, 1978. Ivan had stayed at a hotel a lot during that time, probably with hookers, but she was never found. Or hookers or sister-in-laws.
Yeah.
A few months later, 18-year-old Robin Hickey vanished from a bus stop near her home in Belmont. Ivan was staying at a hotel there at the same time, and police determined that she was a runaway.
Hmm.
Several weeks later, 14-year-old Amanda Robinson went missing on April 29th. She was walking home from a school dance. Gone. Amanda Zola, 16 years old, last seen October 12th, 1979, vanished without a trace. Annette Briffa had been hitchhiking January 10th, 1980. She was seen getting into an orange Mazda, the same make and color of the car that Ivan had at the time. Never seen again.
Oh. Hmm.
November 13th, 1987, Peter Letcher was hitchhiking to his parents' house. The following year, his bones were found near a cave. This cave was a spot where Ivan had taken his wife, Karen, before she kicked his abusive ass to the curb.
Duh.
He had been shot in the head by a .22 rifle and stabbed in the back.
Yep, he did it.
September 6, 1991, Diane Panaccio was walking home. She had told a friend that she was going to catch a ride on Hume Highway. 2 months later, she was found by construction workers covered in brush. She had been paralyzed by a stab to her spine.
Ooh. Yep, he did it.
Around that same
Trademark.
time, yep, that's his trademark. Around the same time, Susan Eisenhood disappeared from hitchhiking. She wasn't discovered until 1986.
Hmm.
Maybe
Wow.
that was 1996.
Maybe 96. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, 96.
yeah.
Yeah.
There are 23 others that it's figured that Ivan did, and Paul's going to read every single one of them. Just the names, just the names.
Just a name.
But we have to
Anita.
we have to for respect. Seriously.
Yeah. 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 Anita Cunningham and Robin Hoinville. Barntum. Yeah, Barntum.
Yeah.
Gabrielle Jenke and Michelle Riley. Lydia Knotts. Narelle Mary Cox, although Ivan had an alibi for that one. Barbara Carol Brown, Stephen Lampthorne and Michelle Pope, Alan Fox and Adrianson, Tony Marie Kavanaugh and Kay Daughtry, Kim Sherry Tier, Elaine Johnson and Carrie Ann Joel, Deborah Balkin and Jillian Jameson, Joanne Lacey and yeah, is that Leslie? Yeah, Leslie
Luckily.
David Toshik, Cameron
Verhaden?
Bordison, Verhaden,
Verhaden. Yeah.
yeah, Verhaden, Cameron Braden, Anne Melanie, and Chad Sutton.
Yep. And these are some of all of these people are still missing.
Wow.
The ones that you read, they're still missing. Well, they
Never.
were at the time that the source was written.
Okay, yeah. I mean, in other words, the bodies have never been found. The
Right.
remains have never been found.
Right.
Still
Otherwise,
missing.
I believe the author would have written them out like like they did in the ones that I read.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Oof. Well, thoughts to, prayers and thoughts to victims and families and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I hope they can get some closure, but
Yeah.
Ivan's dead, and his family ain't talking. and
Yeah.
his siblings are probably they're up there in age too, if not some of them are probably already dead as well, died of old age.
Mhm. Yeah.
Or, but most of these fit Ivan's MO or use the same type of gun, etc. Maybe they just figured they had enough, like in the Pee Wee Gaskins case, to like we got him. There's no sense in going through trials for these other people,
Yeah.
which that's I can see the pros and the cons for that, and I said that in the Pee Wee Gaskins episode.
Mhm.
But he may not have done all of them, but I bet a year's pay that he did some of them, most of
Yeah.
them.
Probably most of them. And,
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
if you've already got a life sentence and doing all that time, it's like, yeah, you kind of go, "Huh." But for the fact too, if you've never found the body, you don't have any evidence as well, because now
right?
you can't pull any forensics off of it.
Yeah,
So,
no body, no crime.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Wow. Mm,
uh, well, that's it. That's this. That's Ivan Milat, a
yeah,
sadistic son of a bitch.
yeah. You could definitely make a movie out of that one.
Hmm. An actual movie, not a loosely based on
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
like Wolf Creek. Although Wolf Creek was a pretty solid horror movie franchise.
yeah,
um, but yeah, it's damn. I mean that going through some of this and everything, I was just like, because not a lot of podcast episodes about him. There's not, and I have a
yeah,
feeling. I think it's probably because of so long to build up before the first murder.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but damn, all the other information leading up to it's interesting too.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it kind of gives you. Yeah, and that's the thing. Most people want to, listen to crime podcasts or stories and stuff like that. They want to know what brought this person, what brought
Right?
this serial killer to do this. What was his
Yeah.
family like? What was his life like? And I mean, hell, law enforcement wants to know that too, because they look at all these cases, all these historical cases of learning and profiling that person, to
Hmm.
see what you know. That's what
Yeah.
profilers look at.
There's a few more. Um, I mean the the serial killer stories out of Australia. This is the third one that we've done. They're all crazy. I
Yeah.
mean they're all just next level crazy. All of them. We did the Truro murders, we did the bodies and barrel murders, and now this one. And there's a couple more that we'll wind up getting to as well that are every bit as crazy. I mean, the body count in this one, dwarfs the body count in the other two.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
but the but the but those two are crazy in their own for their own reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's just wow. I mean, Australia, their serial killers are something else.
Heck,
Like
yeah, it's out in the middle
like
of nowhere, so I don't know.
like these three that we've covered would look at Pee Wee Gaskin and call him a rookie. and
Yeah.
and and he was and he's one of the domestic, the U.S. He's one of the more crazy stories.
Yeah.
But anyway, um,
Yeah.
thanks a hell of a lot for listening. We appreciate the hell out of it, and be sure to check us out on social media. Um, it was a little late at this point, but this is the first episode we've recorded since I did it. I put up a CKCB discussion pub group where it's not like the page that we've had prior where I'm the only one that could make posts. This one, listeners can make their own posts, interact with each other. We got at this point we have 20 members. Jody Plachey is one of them, and he's been active on it, which is really
Cool.
cool. And we've got there's 20 members as we record this. There'll probably be a lot more by the time we actually air this episode. But definitely check that out. It's going to be linked too, and I think over time we're going to phase out the other page and make the discussion pub the main one.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a while because the page has a whole shitload of followers on it. So it's going to take a while to get
Yeah.
them to come over.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're on the page but not on the discussion pub, come on over.
Yeah. Yeah. Go look for it.
Yeah, it's fun, and once it gets rolling, I think it's going to be really fun. And it's what I wanted from the beginning. I just made the wrong type of page, the wrong type of thing for the podcast when I started it.
Mm.
I should have done a group, not a page.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know
And
there was a difference at the time. I do now.
me
So
neither. Every now and then I get confused going, do I want a
I
page or do I want a group?
the
It's
other
like,
night, the night that I set up the group, I had been going through all that meta bullshit page that Facebook has now, trying to find a way to let the followers post.
yeah.
I spent like 2.5 hours before I finally sent a message to Morgan from Human Monsters. And I asked him, I'm like, what's up? How can I let listeners comment on the page? He's like, they can't do it on the page. You have to do a
Ooh.
group. I'm like, that sucks.
Yeah. That's BS.
So now you know.
Jeez.
But Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, our website, our YouTube page, all of it's linked in the show notes. And now, well, it would have happened weeks ago at this point, but the link that I post from our website, which has all of the links to the different platforms to the episode on it, now has the video from YouTube embedded into the link that I post.
Ah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's really cool. I figured that out yesterday, but
Yeah.
and I went back and I added it to all the ones that we had videos for. So, why not?
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
So
Yeah, I gotta get all that meta stuff figured out, which can take, God, yeah, that's a lot of work. But
yeah. So,
cool.
do you have anything in conclusion?
No, not really. Other than thank you all for watching, listening, and like, share, comment, and repost, and tell your friends, family, everybody out there to,
Yeah.
watch the show or listen to the show wherever you listen to your podcast.
If you like us, tell a friend. If you hate us, tell an enemy.
Yeah.
And the way oh my crap, the way that this entire episode, my lights you couldn't see my lights.
Oh, you couldn't see the boom light.
No. Dang it. Oh well.
Yeah, well. Yeah.
I didn't notice that until just now. If I had noticed that earlier, I would have fixed it as soon as I noticed it. Because those lights are cool. Those lights are cool.
Well, people won't know until the end of the show.
So if you like us, tell a friend. If you hate us, tell an enemy. And until next week, later.
Later on, guys and gals.